Today is Thursday, June 20th, 1991. I'm Judson McLaury, M-A-C, capital L-A-U-R-Y, historian in the Office of Policy, and I'm interviewing Mr. Gerard Scannell, G-E-R-A-R-D, S-C-A-N-N-E-L-L, Assistant Secretary of Labor for Occupational Safety and Health.
How and when did you first become involved with the Occupational Safety and Health Administration?
I received a call from George Ginther, who was the first Assistant Secretary, shortly after the agency was officially started, shortly after April 28, 1971, I guess, effective date. He got my name from the Philadelphia Safety Council and the Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce as being should I be humble? Yeah. As having managed one of the best health and safety programs at the time with Rohm and Haas Company up in Bristol, Pennsylvania. And when he called me, the agency was just starting. Everyone was, the fear of OSHA. And I got a call from the assistant secretary. I said, is that the way it's going to happen? They're going to call, the assistant secretary is going to call you and say, we'll come out to inspect you? I had no idea what. And he told me he'd like to talk to me about coming down working for OSHA. I said, oh boy, I can't tell this guy no. It wouldn't be proper. He might then really focus in on the company. I mean, it is strange the way your mind works and things like that. So I said, well, I'm very happy here, but I'd be glad to come down and talk to you. So I did. I came down, was interviewed, and I think what convinced me, first of all, I thought he was probably one of the best administrators OSHA's ever had. I mean, it was the first one, but thinking back, the ones I were, an administrator, he was really, I think he did a good job getting this agency up and running fast, okay? Having get up and running fast also caused some of the problems that we had early on, but nevertheless, it got the agency up and running. And in retrospect, probably if we had to do it over again, we'd do it the same way. But George convinced me by telling me, if you're a true health and safety professional and you want to continue in this business for the rest of your life, which I had intended to, why not have some experience and have a piece of the action of getting this agency off on the right foot? Does that make sense? And then he said, we don't have, you could count on your hand, one hand, the number of health and safety professionals from industry in the agency, and it's true. Most of the people came from the maritime programs and employment standards, and had no experience of managing a health and safety program in a factory or a plant, something like that.
So he wanted that perspective.
He wanted to get someone in who'd been out there, knows what So I did come down, and that's how I got involved in the agency.
And that was as director of standards?
No, that was as a special assistant to George Ginther. And that was to get me on board fast. It was a Schedule C political appointee, but then with the understanding that I would take over the Office of Standards, which at that time was both health standards and safety standards. Goodbye. Yeah.
Could you give a little brief rundown of your career at OSHA in that period until you left in, was it 78 or 70?
79.
79?
Yep.
And then we'll get into some of the broader aspects of what the agency is doing.
Sure. Yeah, I started in August 1971 as a special assistant and got to learn about all aspects of the program and especially state programs. You have a question on that. It was baby OSHA. The director of Public Affairs, the director of Public Affairs. No, the Jim Foster shop, whatever that is, left. So Ginther put me in charge of that. I had no idea of what I was doing at the time. I mean, Time magazine was calling me, and the Post was calling me, and I mean, it was a stopgap. Hey, hold the fort down until we get someone in, and so I did that for a while, which is really interesting. Getting the perspective of the press and
Probably one of the hottest seats in the agency.
It really was. It truly was, and then the National Safety Council had their big National Safety Congress, and OSHA was going to be the centerpiece of it. So I had
This was in 1970.
71, yeah. I'm sure it was 71. I mean, it has been kind of a centerpiece ever since, but I think it was 71. May have been 72.
We can check the date.
Yeah, I think that and I put together this terrific multimedia slideshow for George to I think it was Baby OSHA, and it showed a baby crawling and how we were growing. And so that was really kind of different. I mean, doing projects is fun sometimes, because you can get in, do them, and get out, do something else. Then by that time, I guess the paperwork had gone in. I was converted to career because I had the experience and so forth. And he asked me to go over and take the standards. Well, as it turned out, the first director of standards, Pat, I forget his last name, had a heart attack, and then the second person was about approaching a nervous breakdown. So I said to George, I'll take it for 2 years, but it looks to me like this job is a killer. The standards, there were so many problems with the standards, and we were trying to get them straightened.
Both health and safety.
Both health and safety, and the asbestos petition, and we got into brown lung and everything. As well as I promulgated, when I was there, we promulgated the 15 carcinogens, more standards than the agency has promulgated since then, I guess, as complete standards. But anyhow, I said 2 years, George. He said, yeah. I said, then I'll go on to something else, or I'll leave, because I didn't plan on making it a career. So I was director of standards, and almost 2 years to the day, I then became director of the Office of Federal Agency Safety and Health Programs.
What did that mean? What was that position?
Why it was really created is that the government, OSHA is telling the private sector what they should do in the way of protecting the employees in the private sector. I think there were 5 million federal employees, including the military at the time. And the government wasn't doing what they were telling the private sector to do. So that was, the purpose was to let's organize the government, the 120 independent federal agencies, get them organized to have an occupational safety and health program. To this day, I think that was my finest job. I mean, the best job I ever had. It was terrific. No one as I said, no one knew how to organize an occupational safety and health program. So they gave that to me, and they let me do whatever I wanted to do. It was like I didn't have a boss. It was great. Meeting with the federal agency heads, getting around, finding out how you get things done in the federal agency and so forth. So that was it. And then that brought me up to 1979 when I left and went to J&J.
So you worked under 4 different assistant secretaries.
Yep.
Mr. Gunther, Mr. Stender,
John.
Dr. Corn,
And Eula Bingham. Yep.
If you could talk a little bit about their philosophies, management philosophies, enforcement policies, compare a little bit.
Well, George Ginther was an outstanding administrator. He really was. And he knew organization, and probably was the best of the 4 that I worked for from that standpoint, management, organization.
He was an experienced administrator.
Yes, he was.
From at both federal and state levels.
And he had, I think he was president of the knitting mills. He came, I didn't know him before. I mean, I didn't know him when he had called me. Most people think I knew him. I was a close personal friend of his when Pennsylvania. Yeah, didn't know him. But he did. I think he ran the knitting with the family-owned knitting mills for a while. So he knew organization and had good education and so forth. Yeah, both private sector, state, and the federal government. And depended on his directors to be straightforward and honest, and you could say what you felt and not worry about a bias or anything like that. He wanted you to tell him how the agency needs to be run.
What did he seem particularly interested in?
I don't think I can say there was any one thing, because he was so involved in getting it moving, getting the state plans into place, the enforcement, getting compliance officers. I never heard him say, "I want enforcement. 80% of the program be enforcement. The other 20." I don't think we had progressed to the point where you can sit back and say, this agency needs to be this much enforcement, this much training and education. It just kind of happened because enforcement was considered, a major effort of the agency. Compliance officers inspecting. As a matter of fact, a lot of people still think, enforcement is the only thing. Well, enforcement isn't the only thing. Enforcement doesn't get you to change behavior. So, if he did, I didn't sense there was any state plans. He was, he thought that was very important. I guess coming from a state and all. Yeah, I'd say probably state plans was very important. Big effort in that.
Well, yeah, that was the initial policy was that to emphasize the state plan.
Yes.
It didn't. Do you think that it worked out about the way they hoped it would, or to some it seemed that the response was a little, not quite what was hoped?
No.
At that point.
You're right. You're absolutely right. It was. We weren't overwhelmed. It would be an overstatement if we were overwhelmed. I think the agency, those who were running that part of the program at the time, the state plan program, probably built into the programs too many hurdles for states to get over. Made it too difficult for them to get into the program. I think that was probably too bad. I mean, it depends if you like state. Some don't want state plans, but I do believe in state plans and strongly, and I think we just put up too many roadblocks, too many negatives. I mean, it just made it so difficult. The indices of effectiveness and things like that were tough. But yeah, I think George was really a very pro state plan administrator.
It seemed as though when the states didn't come through as anticipated, that it looked like it left the agency in a lurch there, because suddenly the agency had to take on quite a bit of the burden of enforcement that they had expected the
States to do.
So how did that, as someone who was on the inside at that point, how did that affect the operation of the organization?
Well, I think you have the bureaucratic bias that those in the federal sector, those here, didn't want the state plans to succeed. I mean, the bureaucrats, the career folks, they wanted a strong federal program. Organized labor wanted a strong federal program, and still do. And it's like, why should we give it to the states? Let's keep it for ourselves, and we can do it better.
They didn't trust the state governments.
No, they didn't trust them because the states didn't do it before, and there were a number of state plans that had little occupational safety and health programs themselves, and they didn't do a good job, and so they didn't trust them. So why give them another opportunity? Well, it's a different opportunity from the standpoint of funding and having some guidance from Washington.
There was quite a battle over the state plans. OSHA wanted to extend the time to the time period for allowing the states to submit to qualify.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Qualify, and there was quite a battle, and I think OSHA lost that battle at the time. Do you remember anything?
No, I do remember, but I think I was probably where would I have been? I may have been so wrapped up in standards I didn't care about state plans, or I was in the federal program. But yeah, you're right. But I don't remember the details.
What about the famous or infamous consensus standards that were adopted en masse very quickly, and they took effect in, I believe, August of 1971, although Congress, in the OSHA Act, they allowed up to 2 years. They required adoption, I think, according to my reading of the Act.
But we were allowed 2 years to adopt them. Yeah.
Adapt and adopt.
Yeah. And we didn't adapt them very well. That was the reason.
That was the criticism.
See, well, it was everyone was caught up in. We got a mass of nationally recognized consensus standards, ANSI and NFPA, and recognized, in federal standards and recognized standards. And the business community wanted that. They, I remember being involved in some of those discussions when I was there. Okay. Why let the Secretary of Labor go write standards that they don't have the expertise when we have recognized consensus standards in place? Made sense. Industry says, yeah, use those. So we took them, put them in, and never really examined them or adapted them, because that's when we had the permissive language. I mean, they were great standards, but they were never meant to be regulations that become mandatory. At least parts of them were not. They were how to accomplish things. I mean, they were just things that you don't put into federal regulations.
Meetings with the industry groups.
After we got those in place?
Well,
That was during the legislation, during the year or two, however long it took to write the to write the act. That's when
Actually, 3 years total.
3 years. That's when it.
It started in early 1968.
And it was during that period of time where that kind of consensus was built, and Congress says, well, if industry says that, let's do it. Made sense.
Did you testify at some of the hearings?
No. No, I was either part of the Chamber of Commerce in Philadelphia or the American Society of Safety Engineers or just, but I never personally testified, no.
But you were in the loop.
Oh, yeah.
Discussion that was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone, I mean, the fact that, states weren't doing the job, it was right. I mean, I used to see how the state of Pennsylvania, but it wasn't an OSH program. It was workers' compensation and some accident reporting, and then only had a handful of people who represented the Department of Labor in Pennsylvania.
So the consensus, were you in any meetings when after OSHA was established and you came down as a special assistant where the issue of how will we adopt these consensus standards was raised?
No, I wasn't. I was not part of that. That was
Shed
really,
any light on
yeah. Did you ever talk to John Proctor?
I haven't.
Well, he would have been a guy to talk to. Sometime when he's up here and he's retired, and sometime when he's up here, because he was the second director.
But I'll make a note.
John, a wealth of knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll move along. Another question I wanted to ask about is
But
yes. Sure.
as troublesome as those initial standards appeared to be, those standards today are the core of our standards. 20 years later, they have withstood, with the words we use, we cleaned them up. We took the shoulds out and made of shells. In those things, the specification standards that fire extinguishers should be 2 feet off the floor should be readily available. Because whether it's our compliance officers were going in, if it was 2.5 feet off the floor, you were cited. Well, how does that contribute to health and safety? It doesn't. 6 inches. So we went from specification standards to performance standards. It's got to be accessible, and things like that. Then we got rid of the coat hangers in the stalls and the toilet seats and the couches for women, and that's discriminatory. Retiring room, that's discriminatory. Let's have them for men. That's what came up. Let's just get rid of them. So, once that got taken care of, it wasn't fast, it wasn't easy. But Jed, today, the core standards that we use in enforcement are the same standards. And that's why I said, if we did it again today, we'd probably do it the same way, because it was a way of getting the agency up and running fast, and that was to George Ginther's credit. Okay, just
John Stender was George Ginther's successor at OSHA. How did his approach differ from Ginther's? Did he emphasize different areas?
I would say inspections, enforcement was probably more his forte. John came out of the Boilermakers, so he had a labor background, although he was a state senator in Washington.
And he was involved in the establishment of an OSHA program, I believe, in the state of Washington.
I think he was. That's right. When he was a senator up there. Yeah, that's right. I think I'd forgotten that. That's right. So John's background was more enforcement, he didn't have to be, a classic administrator. He brought in with him, I think, Howard Schulte as his deputy. Howard was a regional administrator and an experienced career person. And so Howard became the kind of the day-to-day administrator of the agency, and John did bigger picture things in dealing with OMB, the White House, and the Hill. I didn't always like to do that, but he did do that.
Didn't he emphasize standards more though?
Well, he did emphasize standards because I was the director of standards at the time. And because I think he was probably being lobbied by the FFL-CIO, which he was close to, on enforcement and standards. If you don't have standards to enforce, then you don't have the program that is wanted. So he did emphasize standards. Now that you mention it, I had some interesting experiences with him in that area.
Any particular that stand out in your mind?
Probably not for quoting.
This is for posterity.
Posterity. Oh God, just generally. At the time, there was a move in the government to form super agencies. And the super agency was going to be Health, Human Services at the time was what HEW, Health, Education, Welfare, Labor Department, and I think one other. And Caspar Weinberger was the Secretary of HEW. And then you had a Secretary of Agriculture, Butts, Earl Butts. He had some others. I ended up over at the White House, and there's Ehrlichman and Haldeman. It was Earl Butts. There was Caspar Weinberger.
This is a meeting at the White House?
Yeah, it's a meeting on pesticide standard. And or on a standard, I shouldn't say the pesticide standard. I think Ben Mintz was along, and I was there. And Earl Butts sided up to me, he puts his arm around me, "Hi, buddy, how you doing?" I mean, that was his whole long-lost friend. He could charm a snake. He was smooth. We came out of there. We convinced them the standard that we were talking about was needed and appropriate. And
was the secretary Brennan?
No, he wasn't. And that I think. Yeah, see, I'm not sure. Yeah, at the time, they're talking like Weinberger would be the person that represents HEW labor, and maybe it was, I don't know what other agency it was. And so that's why he was there. And Butts was there because I guess it was the pesticide standard. And
Ehrlichman and Haldeman both?
No, I met them both, but someone handled domestic issues more than the other one. Goodness. They were both there for a short time. I think it probably was Ehrlichman rather than Haldeman.
But the president wasn't.
No, the president wasn't there. And, it was, for me, it was terrific. I mean, being over there among those power brokers. But little old OSHA held their own. And
was that unusual?
Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah, that never happened again that I remember. But the standard, the pesticide standard, I think it was pesticide, that's why Butts was there, was a major issue.
Right. Right, that was one of those group standards that.
Yes, it was. Yep. And the apples for entering, it was really the reentry issue. How soon after you spray the pesticide can you reenter without it affecting, getting on and affecting the pruners and the pickers and so forth. But
Brennan wasn't at that meeting. Was he particularly involved with OSHA, or did he delegate it?
I think he delegated it. Tough for me to say because I really wasn't in that. But I know Peter Brennan was. I went to him once to get him to speak at the federal safety council out in Chicago, and he says, "Terrific, you do it." I mean, he was a very approachable secretary. I mean, I didn't think I'd ever get up to see Peter Brennan. So wasn't Bill Esri. Not that the others weren't, but I just did have the opportunity to go to those two.
When Brennan left, he was replaced by John Dunlop. And John Dunlop came in and kind of looked to me like he cast a cold eye at the whole department. And OSHA was a focus of his attention because it was such a major regulatory agency and very controversial. All those years it was a very controversial agency.
Yep.
He brought in a team of a management team to go over OSHA with a fine-tooth comb.
The Whiz Kids.
Okay, what about the Whiz Kids?
I think isn't that what we call? Did you hear that before?
No, that's the first.
Marshall Harris, Marshall.
No,
Marshall. Oh,
I can get that.
I saw him at an airport. Bert Conklin and Marshall. Whatever. Was it Marshall? Yeah. God, I met him about 2 months ago on an airplane. Where was I then, though? I don't think I was in.
Spring of 1975.
I think I was in federal aid. Oh no, I think I might have still been in standards. The Whiz Kids, yeah. Well, I didn't have standards. Standards is a difficult part of this. Still is very difficult part of it, but there was the process was in place. The Administrative Procedures Act, you just followed certain things. And because the process was well known and followed, they didn't get involved much. I mean, the Whiz Kids didn't get involved that much. They were involved in other aspects of the agency. So I mean, I was in the staff meetings and all of that, but I did not experience anything, extremely unusual, as some others may have. I mean, they're two bright guys, but had some marching orders, I guess, from John Dunlop to do whatever they were to do, and I'm not really sure what came of that.
You weren't there.
No, I wasn't. I mean,
I just wondered, why were they called the Whiz Kids, though?
I think at the time.
Because they were just young?
Yeah, I think they both must have just got their MBAs or whatever it was, and that was what you called the MBAs at that time, the Whiz Kids. Well, and they were young and energetic, and were going to reshape this and get this agency marching to John Dunlop's music, I guess.
And ironically, John Dunlop left shortly after they found a replacement, Morton Korn. And John Dunlop left January of 1976. Korn just took office in December. So, quick change there. But was there a drastic change when Morton Korn came in as Assistant Secretary?
Well, I think
From your
nothing changes drastically very fast in the government.
He wanted it to change.
And Mort, he was frustrated. He truly was. He's a good professional. I think he was probably a pretty good administrator. Recognized the need for better professionalism in the agency, and especially in the health area, industrial hygiene and so forth. I think he was right. As a matter of fact, I'm following a little bit in that area of. I would like to leave a legacy of uplifting the professionalism of this agency and getting it kind of institutionalized so it just doesn't go up and down depending on assistant secretaries. It should always be, I think,
I'd
up
like
there.
to get more into that later.
Yeah. But Mort got the agency moving in the area of health professionalism. Okay. Moving in the area of focusing on health issues, and rightly so. He saw it as an issue where many others had not seen it, probably because of the lack of data. Data drives programs, and one reason why we need better data to operate our program today. So Mort really got the agency moving in the area of health.
You served for a time in the Eula Bingham administration.
Yes.
Maybe you can verify something for me. I have an impression that many of Eula Bingham's policies were a direct result of initiatives that started in Morton Corn's time, or some of them not even initiatives, just ideas that he didn't have time to implement, but passed on. I know that Bert Conklin, who by then had become his deputy, stayed over for a time in the Bingham administration and prepared a briefing paper.
Marshall Miller is the one.
Okay. The other whiz kid, Marshall Miller.
For the record.
Bert Conklin and Marshall Miller. When Marshall left early,
yes.
He never had a permanent position with the agency.
No.
But Bert stayed on, and after Morton Corn left, and Bert prepared a very interesting document, a transition memo for Eula Bingham, outlining, he just must have pulled together all of Corn's ideas and wishes and presented them. It appeared to me like the kernel of a program. And they put it up, they added many things, and of course, and they used different terminology. They had the common sense priorities to their stamp to things.
Yep.
But it appeared to me as though the Conklin, what I'll refer to as the Conklin memo, really kind of, in a way, set an agenda that much of it was followed.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that? Did that float around much, or?
There's one that Mort Corn wrote.
Okay.
Is that a different one? Yeah. Okay. Right. Yep. Well, I think you're. I think that's exactly right. I think they did use what Bert put together, and that was supplemented or bought in by organized labor. Eula was very close to the AFL-CIO, and Eula was probably the most sincere health professional I've ever met. I mean, she truly was. Had some outstanding qualities, but probably was not a good administrator. And that really is not a criticism, I don't think, but she was really truly a very serious health professional. But I think guided too much by the AFL-CIO, in my opinion. would not even talk to business in some cases at all. I have no reason to talk to you. You're the bad people. You know, no matter how you feel in this position, you've got to walk the middle of the road, and you can't tilt either to organized labor or business. Public policy just dictates you must be impartial and all. So.
Well, speaking of business, in 1979, you assumed the position of, why don't you tell me the name of it, at Johnson & Johnson Corporation.
Yeah. I was director of corporate health, safety, and environmental affairs. Initially, it was just corporate health and safety. Then I took on environmental affairs later on for worldwide operations, 150 companies worldwide.
Did you have quite a bit of contact with OSHA during that time, any level? Or?
I had almost no contact with OSHA. Interesting. One contact was when I came back, and Chuck Hurley and Chuck was the Vice President of Public Policy with the National Safety Council. Chuck was with Congressman Bill Steiger when Steiger, as the William Steiger, yeah. So Chuck used to call, when he was over with Congressman Steiger and I was at Standards, he used to call me 5 o'clock every night just about, and beat me down for an hour. Congressman Steiger watched over this agency like a mother hen. And he truly did. We met with him a lot, met with Hurley and others here. I mean, he was just a great guy. This was his baby. He wanted to make sure his name was on the legislation. He wanted to make sure it worked. Chuck and I got together, and this is shortly after President Reagan was in office and Thorne Octor was appointed. And President Reagan ran on a number of things, but ran on get government off the back of business.
Regulatory relief.
Regulatory relief. And Chuck and I, drinking a beer, said, what would be a good program? You know, you can't just walk away from the health and safety program, OSHA. So we dreamt up what is now called the Voluntary Protection Program. Well, we said to Thorne, and I guess Mark Cowan at the time, there are companies out there, because they've been talking about, we don't need OSHA, we got a good program. Well, there must be companies out there who are willing to step up to the plate, you know, and say, I got a great program, look at it. It's no reason for you to come in and inspect me. Use your resources on those companies that need OSHA's attention. And there are a lot of companies out there. And I think J&J probably was one after several years, but maybe not at the time I got there. But I knew there were some companies. And from that he took and he developed a voluntary protection program.
That's very interesting.
And I think it is a terrific program. And as a matter of fact, right now it's being considered by the Competitiveness Council in the White House, which is chaired by Vice President Quill, as a deregulatory program. And they want us to do more in that area. And I'm saying, this is not deregulatory. I mean, the fact that we do not inspect them for 3 years, we give them a 3 year, except if there's a complaint, we'll come back in. If there's a fatality, we'll come back in, a catastrophe. So we have a string on the VPP. But right now, the VPP program, on the average, they have a 70% better or lower injury illness rate than companies in their own classification. But that's how it got going. We said, in a way it was deregulatory, but it wasn't. What it was saying, hey, let's get companies to come up and say they're okay, bare their chest, let OSHA look at anything they want, and then sign off and say, you're in the BPP program. The only thing I'm disappointed about is that more companies didn't do it. It's just the fear, I guess, of dealing with the government. But that was I met Dawn there. I don't think I saw him except maybe once or twice at the National Safety Congress in October where everyone gets together. I met John Pendergrass at the National Safety Council, although I think I had met John Pendergrass over the years at some professional society meetings. Never met Bob Rowland. And I got to know Pat Tice a little bit from knowing him a little bit here when we were both here. I left shortly after he really came with the solicitor's office.